to Dune Club Session 4. For this session, you should have read pages 166 through 262 in this mass market paperback. This session ends with Dr. Yui hissing, "The tooth!" So now, let's get into our recap. Previously in Dune, House Atreides have left their ancestral home of planet Caladan and have taken over the fief of the desert planet Arrakis, otherwise known as Dune. While settling into their new home in the city of Arrakeen, Paul survives an assassination attempt, the Lady Jessica receives intelligence of a traitor in her inner circle from a fellow Bene Gesserit, and the Duke and his men are working around the clock to secure the planet for House Atreides. Leto also receives and secretly dismisses intelligence from his mentat indicating Jessica could be the traitor hiding among them. In Session 4, we have Worm Sign when Leto and Paul strap on their still suits to meet the Imperial ecologist Dr. Kynes for a field trip into the wild desert of Arrakis to observe spice mining, and they end up witnessing a sandworm engulf one of their factories whole. Later, the Atreides host a group of powerful men and women of high and low society in a high-tension dinner party. Later that night, Jessica discovers that she is suspected as the traitor and confronts Hawat head-on, only for Leto to tragically uncover the traitor for himself a couple days later. After bringing down the house generators and incapacitating the Duke, Dr. Yui reveals himself and his plan, offering Leto a deal that he cannot refuse. At the top of Session 4, we have the Duke, Leto, and Paul having a moment alone before they have their trip into the desert. And Leto at this point is really exhausted. He's feeling very alone in this war of assassins, and he lets his mask of confidence go in front of his son because he needs Paul's help. His most urgent confidence in Paul is about Hawat's suspicion of Jessica, and that Leto must put up a pretense that he believes this lie and not tell Lady Jessica about any of this, maybe hurt her feelings, but he's doing this to hopefully smoke out the traitor, and he wants to make sure that Paul lets Jessica know that he never doubted her for an instant if things go wrong. But also on a deeper level, Leto confides that he's morally tired from the melancholy degeneration of the great houses, which harkens back to his dream of the destruction of the Fafrlukes in Session 3. At this point, Leto is super over it. He hates all of this political bullshit, especially not marrying Jessica, because he has to live this lie and create an air of bravura, and he's just over it. He longs for anonymity. He's like, maybe we should have gone renegade, Paul. Maybe I made a mistake. And Paul's like, what are you talking? He's very surprised to hear his dad speaking like this. And Leto also talks about the real possibility that Paul may have to go guerrilla. Since they didn't go renegade, he might have become hunted and have to become a guerrilla house. And that playing this political game will cost a man his self-respect, which, he's saying that about himself, obviously. He's cost himself his self-respect by not marrying the woman that he loves. And he also tells Paul to capitalize on the Fremen belief that Paul might be their Messiah if it comes down to it. He's like, if it gets to that, capitalize on it. Another thing that I really liked about this chapter was when Leto talks about his propaganda corps, his PR team. He mentions that he has one of the finest propaganda corps, of everyone, and that they must continue to flood village and city with their information. They're making all this film base. They're making sure it's flooding the towns. And he takes this approach rather than the Harkonnen approach of ruling through fear and degradation. The Duke doesn't want to rule like that. He wants his subjects to like him, so he uses good PR. And he also does genuinely good things, but he wants to make sure that people love and respect him and think he's a good ruler, and that's how he gets them to become loyal to him. In our next chapter, we finally have Worm Sign. We're getting into the desert. It's really exciting. And we finally get to meet Dr. Kynes, who is the judge of the change. He's also the imperial ecologist, or planetologist as he prefers to be called. And it's important to note the word ecology and the idea of Dr. Kynes, because Herbert is deliberately seeding ideas about ecology and environmentalism into his audience because at the time of its release in 1965, the average person did not consider the idea of the ecology of an entire planet, let alone the idea of climate change. And Herbert saw ecological consciousness as highly important, and this aspect of the story is ever present, and it's just as important as Paul's story, and in fact, the novel can't even function without it. So now we get to see Kynes meeting the people that he has been ordered to betray by the Emperor, and he is immediately struck by how well Paul fits the ancient Fremen prophecy. And when they're first meeting, he's even startled when Paul quotes the Orange Catholic Bible on him, thanking him for these still suits, and thinks to himself, the prophecy states, "He will greet you with holy words, and your gifts shall be a blessing." And then later on, he's even further startled while checking over Leto and Paul's still suits to find that Paul has instinctively adjusted his suit perfectly, as if he's worn them before, because they're really complicated outfits. And that's another part of the prophecy that states, "He shall know your ways as if born to them." Even though he is struck by all of these synchronicities, he is still skeptical, and frankly, he's really annoyed at having to play out this farce of this field trip with this doomed water-fat duke, and Leto's over here, asking him for his help in stealing imperial property, and it's making him really uncomfortable. It's interesting to note that during this trip, Duke Leto is the one who has elected to fly the ornithopter around, and he also spots a bird in the distance, and he also spots worm sign. And at one point, Kynes tells him that he has really sharp eyes. And I think it's really funny that the Duke not only has these very hawkish features, he also has these other hawkish qualities, like having really great eyesight and also being really good at flying his machine around. Frank Herbert chose the hawk symbol for House Atreides because the hawk symbolizes the higher self, like the one who witnesses the entire scene from a higher perspective, someone who sees the big picture. And I love that Leto and his son perfectly embody this metaphor in so many ways. So let's get back to the worm sign. Sandworms are attracted to the rhythmic vibrations that are produced by the spice factories, otherwise known as the sand crawlers. And they always come, and so when somebody spots one, what happens is they call a carryall, which is a giant flying machine that comes down, picks up the sand crawler, carries it to safety. Everybody gets the spice. It's awesome. Sandworm doesn't eat it. Wonderful. Now, while the Duke and his retinue are out there, the carryall never shows up. Some Harkonnen fuckery is probably afoot, and the Duke is really upset about it, and he's really worried about these men, down working, trying to get all this spice, these spice miners. So he's like, all right, guys, let's all land. Let's take these guys aboard our ships, and that's all we can do. And they abandon the factory to the Leviathan worm, who comes up and swallows this easily swallows this giant factory. It's super insane. And they get to see a sandworm for the first time. And during this trip, Paul has not only been registering Kynes' face and voice, but he also notices that when the sandworm bursts out of the ground, he says this prayer. Kynes says, "Bless the Maker and his water. Bless the coming and going of him. May his passage cleanse the world. May he keep the world for his people." And witnessing Kynes performing this prayer really confirms to Paul that Kynes has gone native. Of course, he works for the Emperor, but honestly, he really cares about this planet and these people. Now, Kynes is further disturbed later on when Paul rightly spots some Fremen. They're leaving with their ships. There's two guys out there on the sand, and, Paul's like, well, what about these guys? Why can't we put them on one of the ships? And they're like, oh, don't worry about them. They're just some friends. They were here to see the spice sands. That's the chance you take when you come with us. And Paul just sees like right through this lie. He's like, these are obviously Fremen and they're not scared to be out there. And Kynes knows that Paul is picking up on this falsehood and thinks to himself about the prophecy that says, the Lisan al-Gaib will see through all subterfuge. And since Kynes is so determined to keep this lie, and Paul notices that, Paul is like, well, I feel sorry for those guys that are going to die. And Kynes responds to him, telling him that when God hath ordained a creature to die in a particular place, he causeth that creature's wants to direct him to that place. And when he says this, like, Leto looks right at him and gives him a hard stare, essentially telling him, like, yeah, I get it. I know I'm going to die. Like, I came here and I'm going to die. And when Kynes sees this reaction and shares this moment with him, and he also sees the Duke's reaction to his men's lives being threatened on the crawler and how upset he was about it, Kynes finds that against his own will and all of his previous judgments, that he likes this Duke. You know, he kind of digs this guy. He's really shocked by this. And it's so funny because, again, it's like, again, you got Atreides, man. Like, that's what they do. They make you like them just by being awesome dudes. Now, before we get into the dinner scene, I want to talk about the header of this chapter, which states, greatness is a transitory experience. It is never consistent. It depends in part upon the myth-making imagination of humankind. And the person who experiences greatness must have a feeling of the myth that he is in. And he must reflect what is projected upon him. And he must have a strong sense of the sardonic. This is what uncouples him from belief in his own pretensions. The sardonic is all that permits him to move within himself. Without this quality, even occasional greatness will destroy a man. And I really love this quote because I feel like there's just so much truth in it. It's essentially saying that if you're going to become a famous person of some sort, you know, you have some amount of power, you're in the public eye, and people are projecting these ideas onto you, you have to kind of be this idealized version of yourself, then in order to not be destroyed by this fame, that you have to have a really cynical attitude and also understand mockery, like know what a mockery all this is, like what a sham all of this fame is, because you're going to have all these people being like, oh, you're so great. And if you start to believe them, then you start fucking up. You know, if you start believing your own myth, like you're fucked. Like it's just super not good for you. And that's really what happens to a lot of famous people. They get this fame and then they start believing in this lie and denying their humanness and not seeing the mockery and the farce of it all and end up destroying themselves.
Is that what you're going to do?
No, because I have a sense of mockery and cynicism. It's such a joke. It's like, it's all such a fucking joke. I think it was good to read that for me. Because I was like, yes, you do need to be like this. I'm fucking stupid. I'm a clown. No matter what people say, like, I'm totally an idiot. So now let's get into one of my favorite chapters, the dinner party scene. This is so great. Jessica has planned a dinner party with the powerful social elites of Arrakis. And she's doing this because she wants to mix their men in with the locals on a social plane because she understands the importance of social sharing. That's part of her Bene Gesserit soft skills coming in. But not only that, she also wants to throw a dinner party because one of the best ways to ferret out fuckery and to get a lay of the land is through social interaction. But before dinner begins, Kynes has another startling moment where Jessica unknowingly stumbles upon another aspect of the Fremen prophecy. You have this water shipper, and he's like, oh my gosh, you're getting rid of our basin custom, which we'll talk about in a minute. But, okay, so you're going to get rid of this custom. Well, what about that wet plant conservatory? You guys going to keep that? And Leto's like, oh my God, like he doesn't know what to say to this guy. And Jessica hops in and she's like, you know what? We're going to keep this conservatory in trust for the people of Arrakis until the day that plants can be grown in the open. You know, I mean, and it's a total like insult. It's the perfect thing to say to this guy. But when Kynes hears this, he's like, oh my God, you know, they shall share your most precious dream. And the Fremen most precious dream is Arrakis not being a hellhole. They want to be able to grow plants. They want to have water. They want to have greens growing openly. And she just said, like, our dream is to see that for the planet, which would also fuck over the water shipper, because if there was that much water, then he wouldn't have any money anymore. Since the Harkonnens have been ruling this fief for a long time, they've put in all these customs. And one of the customs is of the basin, where when a guest comes over, they dip their hands in this basin of water, and then they slop a couple of cups of water onto the floor. Then they dry their hands on a towel and then fling it into the puddle of water. And then after dinner, beggars will come to the house and they'll gather and they will ask for the water squeezings from the towels, these dirty hand towels. Okay, like that's so savage. Like, oh my God. And when Leto finds this out, he is like, no. Like, he's so disgusted by this that he instantly is like, we're changing this custom. We're not doing this. And in fact, any beggar who comes to the door while we're eating is to be given a full cup of water from the basin, until we're finished. And he's also, like, not only is he disgusted with this custom, he's also disgusted that his dinner guests have been a part of this custom. That they've been doing this for so long. They've been a party to it. And he throws this hideous act right back into their faces. And he despises everyone at this dinner party, by the way, except for, like, maybe Dr. Kynes. He's just like, I don't want to even sit with these motherfuckers. And what he does is he makes them all toast to him with their own flagon of water at the table that's, like, beside their plate. And they have to drink some of the water. And then he makes another toast afterwards, and this time he has a toast to the dead, and he kind of says this poetry words about the dead, so they have to take another big sip out of their flagon. And then, at the end, he, like, makes them pour one out for their homies onto the floor, out of their own flagon, not out of some basin where everyone's dipped their hands and it's gross. Like, they have to, if you want to waste water, why don't you waste your own fucking water, is essentially what he's saying. And they're all, like, they didn't want to do it, they're just like, they have no problem with dipping their hands in the basin, but pouring out their own water is fucking not the deal. And man, that's savage. Like, I love you have the Harkonnen savagery, but the Atreides coming in with their own brand of savagery. It's just amazing to witness. So now we're at dinner, and through the course of this dinner, Jessica, Paul, and Leto figure out a lot about all the different people who are there. And some of the main players at the table are Dr. Kynes, who they see as a good dude, but they also see that he is extremely powerful. Jessica notices that he is a casual killer. He doesn't mind killing people, that he is absolutely in with the Fremen in a big way. And he's so powerful that even the guild banker will not fuck with him, like, will not dare with him. Kynes is like, I dare you. And the guy ends up having to apologize to him. We also have Esmar Tuick. He is a smuggler leader, and they figure out that he is allegiant to Kynes. They see that he defers to Kynes, and that Jessica has invited him because she thinks that he might be able to smuggle them out if they are attacked and they need to leave the planet. He could be used for escape. We also have the water shipper that I talked about earlier, Lingar Butte. And they find out that this guy is a piece of shit, that he's greedy, that he's willing to possibly destroy all of the water, which would destroy the planet, essentially. Everyone would die. Like, he controls the majority of the water on the planet, and if anything happens to him and he gives some signal and all the water is destroyed on this planet, like, everyone's dead. And Leto's like, oh, that's why the Harkonnens couldn't control this guy, because he had this club over them. Also at the table is a representative of the guild bank. His nickname is Susu, which I love. Jessica thinks that that's just like the dumbest name ever. But Jessica also notices that he is an obvious Harkonnen agent. Her Bene Gesserit skills kick in, and she hears in his tones that he's from Gedi Prime, which is the Harkonnen planet. And you also have at the table the still suit manufacturer. Jessica figures out, oh, this guy is a weak social climber. We can buy him if we need to. But we also find out that he's in league with the guild banker. And also the manufacturer's daughter is there. And she's also in league with the guild banker at her father's request. And is also there as a sexual lure for Paul, although it totally doesn't work, and Paul sees right through it, and everybody does. And there's so many interactions that go on, and there's like so much tete-a-tete back and forth between everyone at this party. But my favorite sick burn of the night is when Leto leaves. He gets this message, and he has to attend to something. He's got to take care of business. And he has Paul take his seat as the head of the table. And immediately as he sits down, the guild banker insults Paul. And he's calling him a boy. He said, let's all, toast to the boy who must be treated like a man. And Paul, he sees this insult, and his subtle insult back to him is so great. He does it through an anecdote. And he essentially is saying that this guild banker, the only reason he's insulting Paul right now is because this banker has been a bitch all night, that everyone has been beating him up around the table. I mean, he had to tell Kynes he was sorry, okay? And so the only reason that he's roasting Paul is because he's been roasted all night. And this gets like such a laugh from the smuggler. Like the smuggler is like, oh my God, I can't believe this kid just called him out. And Susu is like, gets really upset. And then he calls Paul out, directly, saying, you have insulted me. And Jessica gives the perfect final blow. She says back to him, my son displays a general garment, and you claim that it's cut to your fit? What a fascinating revelation. It's like, it's so, again, just Atreides savagery. Like, it was so amazing. It's my favorite part. But another interesting part within the conversations is about ecology. Ecology is also brought up again. We talk about the law of minimum, and the law of minimum is where growth is limited by that necessity which is present in the least amount. And naturally, the least favorable condition controls the growth rate. So that's another interesting ecological idea that Frank Herbert wants to put in his readers' minds. Now, before the chapter ends, Jessica gets a note from Leto while he was taking care of business, and the note says that they have found a shipment of laser guns that have been smuggled in by the Harkonnens. And let's talk about shields for a second, okay? Because as we stated in some of the previous sessions, the Atreides really like using shields. That's their deal. And shields are essentially like this force field. You can put them on your belt and have a personal shield. You can put it over your ornithopter. You can put it over your house. You can put it over your ship as it's going into space. Like, they rely on shields. But on Arrakis, shields are a problem, because if you're in the desert with a shield, it's going to call a sandworm. And the Harkonnens know this, so they know that they can't use their shields in certain places, and so they're smuggling in these things called laser guns. Now, laser guns, they're like laser guns. They're fucking lasers. But the thing is that if a laser gun, like if its laser comes in contact with a shield, it causes a huge explosion. Like, not as much as an atomic explosion, but like pretty bad. And it could either kill like just the two people, like the guy holding the laser gun and the guy with the shield, or it could kill like everyone around them. Like, you don't know. It's completely unpredictable. And throughout these chapters, we've seen Leto really uncomfortable with the fact that they can't use their shields. And this is just another thing where it's like, oh my God, laser guns are being smuggled in? Like, that's not good. We really can't use our shields. So later that night, Duncan Idaho comes back to the house, and he is super drunk. He's super drunk on spice beer, and he's causing such a commotion that he wakes the Lady Jessica up. She comes outside. She's trying to deal with this problem. She keeps trying to give him caffeine, like drink this coffee, sober up. Slaps him in the face even. She gets so annoyed that she slaps him in the face. And he lets it slip because he's drunk that Jessica is suspected as a Harkonnen spy. He's like, I'm not taking orders from some damn Harkonnen spy. And immediately the Lady Jessica is so pissed. She's like, wait, what? Like, people think I'm the traitor? You gotta be shitting me. So she commands that how it be brought before her in her sitting room ASAP. You bring him here ASAP because I need to talk to this Mentat about this. And he shows up, and the first thing that she does is put him to the question to find out if he's the traitor. She asks him some questions to see if like her truth sense will let him know. And she realizes that he isn't a traitor. She is assured that he's all about Duke Leto. He's loyal to them. So now that she knows that he's clean, she tries to convince him that she's not the traitor so that he can use his time to actually find the real one. And to do this, she first draws him out, first with logic. She tries to appeal to his Mentat brain. And then she makes him try to see that his judgment is clouded with his emotions and has him admit that he does not trust the Bene Gesserit. And she's like, well, your emotions are clouded. You don't trust me because I'm part of the Bene Gesserit. And that's clouding, coloring all of your suspicions here. And then she goes on to explain to him how, by making her look like the traitor, how this Harkonnen plot is going to mess. Like, she essentially explains exactly what's going on to him. It's like, the Harkonnens are obviously doing this to turn us against each other because we're the two most powerful advisors to the Duke. And if we're fighting each other, then we can't find the real problem. To which he's still like, yeah, I think you're the traitor. And then so she's like, okay, this guy needs to be shocked. I need to shock him. And she uses the voice on him for the first time. And the voice is, we've seen this, Guys Hal Mohim did this on Paul, where they say a command in a certain way, which will make the person that they say this to immediately obey them without thinking about it. Like, they don't even think about it. And she tells him, sit down, you're not dismissed. And before he can even, anything, he's like, his muscles give out on him and he sits back down. And Thufir has no idea about this. I mean, he thought he knew about the Bene Gesserit, but then he sees this. I mean, he is shocked by the depth of her real power. So shocked, in fact, that he's like, well, why aren't you a fucking superhero? Like, why aren't you going out and finding the Duke's enemies? And she's like, we're not going to do that. Like, we're Bene Gesserit. We really do exist only to serve. And I'm not here to make everyone weaker because I'm so strong and do everyone's job for them. And also, that would let everybody know how powerful we are. We don't want everyone to know how powerful we are. And I love that she tells him, it's like, well, now you've seen the fist within the Bene Gesserit glove, And she's just like, you see? Like, if I can do this to you, then I am not the traitor. Like, I could make Duke Leto do whatever I want. He could be a puppet for me. Like, this is how powerful I am. I'm not the traitor. I could kill him 1,000,000 years ago. Like, what? And even though she has gone through all of these steps to show him that she's not the traitor, he still does not fully believe her. Although she now has his supreme admiration. Like, he very much admires her for all of this power that she has, but he still doesn't trust her. And she's like, that's fine. Just keep looking though. And she trusts that the truth will come out eventually, which it does in our final chapter of this session. We have Leto. He's hanging around in the house. It's like the middle of the night. It's like 2 hours before dawn comes up. And he hasn't slept in over 2 days. I mean, he's just taking these anti-fatigue pills. He's taking uppers to stay awake so he can deal with all this stuff. He's so tired. He's so ragged. And he's walking around and he first finds the body of Tuik, the smuggler. He's dead in the hallway. And then he hears this soft mewling sound. And then he finds Mapes. The shout-out Mapes is dead. She's also in the hallway. And after finding Mapes, Yui darts him before he can put his shields up, before he can defend himself. And now he's paralyzed. And he sees that Yui has sabotaged the house generators, leaving them wide open to attack because they have shields over the house. And it's okay because they're on the rock. They're not in the desert, so you can have shields there. But it's like, oh my God, we're ruined now. And so now Yui reveals his plan to Leto while he has him there paralyzed. He tells him about how he actually does want to kill a man, even though his imperial conditioning makes it to where he shouldn't want to do this. He really does want to kill the Baron, but he's still doing it by proxy, which is interesting. Like, I don't know if Yui could actually hold a knife and stab someone, but I think he can do it through someone else. And he's doing it through Leto. And he tells Leto that he will save Jessica and Paul, and in return, he's going to give the Duke a poison gas tooth, replace an other tooth, and that when the Baron gets close to him, gets close to Leto, to bite the tooth and then exhale strongly into his face, and then that will kill the Baron, you know. And he also states, he's like, I don't want to kill you, you know, you were already dead. And that's another thing, like, talking about how Yui, like, how they convinced him to do this, is they were like, the Duke's already a dead man no matter what. The Emperor is against him. There's nothing you can do. So that's also, like, part of the how they broke his imperial conditioning. So that ends session 4. For session 5, you need to read pages 263 through 324, which will round out the first book within Dune. Now, we're going to take a short break and come back and take questions from our live audience.